AOC really thought this was her moment to shine. Roll the clip.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
During a House hearing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went off on one of her usual tangents, trying to justify taking away people's guns. But Congressman Clay Higgins wasn't having it and shut her down with just one line.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? The country where homes were built in cities with no locks.
That's why today we're breaking it all down. Because we're not here to pick sides. We're here for plain old common sense. So, if you like thinking for yourself, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right in.
Let's talk facts here. There was a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline that is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in New York City come from.
AOC's point here is clear. The concept of the iron pipeline allows firearms purchased legally in states with looser laws like Florida or Georgia to be illegally trafficked into cities like New York. She is attempting to frame this entire issue as a problem of firearms supply and interstate regulation, placing the blame squarely on red states. It's an argument that focuses entirely on punishing the supplier and ignores the user's criminal intent. However, she tries to make a similar case when she turns her attention to the violence plaguing Chicago and its neighboring state, Indiana, regarding the flow of these deadly instruments.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states. I move on. Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass shooting. This is not normal. Not only is it not normal, it is internationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
So yeah, it's a bit ironic coming from someone whose party put Biden in the White House and ran Kamala as VP. But now she's suddenly worried about how other countries see us. Not too long ago, the former president looked completely lost during international events. And then there's Chicago, home to some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country. It's true, nearly half the guns used in crimes there come from out of state. But that actually proves the opposite of what AOC is saying. It shows that people determined to commit crimes will always find a way, no matter how many regulations are on the books. You don't even have to look far. Canada, several countries in Europe, they all have tough gun laws, and yet the problems still exist. Or criminals just switch to other weapons. But AOC didn't stop there. Nope, she doubled down and tried to pinpoint what she called the real issue, saying this.
Now let's talk about why. Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans died by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Yes.
AOC presents a very specific correlation. She sees a direct link between the financial health of the arms industry and the rate of national fatalities. This is where her focus shifts entirely from the weapon itself to the money behind the political debate. She immediately pivots to paint a picture of massive corporate lobbying and spending designed to block any safety legislation. After making this sweeping financial claim, she attempts to redirect the entire conversation toward what she calls the actual root causes, a move designed to distract from the obvious failures in her own party's policies.
For context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone. That's more than twice the entire salary of Congress combined. In 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion about anything but a gun, but that these are about violent people. But yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass shootings are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connections between that and mass in our communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
First off, dragging identity politics into the gun debate is exactly what we don't need. It just muddies the facts. Second, someone should remind AOC that correlation isn't causation. And third, tossing numbers around without context proves very little. In 2023, nearly 47,000 people from gun-related injuries. But that same year, motor vehicle accidents killed over 43,000 people, and even simple falls accounted for almost 47,000 deaths. So, do we ban cars or stop people from walking upstairs? Obviously not. The takeaway is clear. Throwing stats at a problem without honest discussion or common sense gets you nowhere. Thankfully, Clay Higgins was there to cut through the noise and bring some clarity. Let's see what he had to say.
I'm going to bring us back in time to World War II. America's population, 140 million. 15 million American men came home from World War II. And there was weapons everywhere. We'll talk about mental challenge. My father was one of those men who was a Navy pilot in World War II. He came back from the war and built his family. I'm the 7th of his 8 children. We had guns everywhere. There was virtually no regulation. Any child in the 50s could buy a weapon from any seller if Daddy sent them with the money. We didn't have mass shootings. It wasn't until 1968 in America that serial numbers were even required on weapons sold in this country. You order weapons through the Sears catalog by the mail.
That's the uncomfortable conversation nobody really wants to have, and for good reason. First, the breakdown of family structures plays a part. Decades ago, two-parent households were far more common. Today, that's shifted significantly. Another factor is how these incidents are defined. Nowadays, a mass shooting can be any event where one or more individuals fire at victims, regardless of fatalities. But the federal government used to define it strictly as an incident with at least 4 people killed. You can thank the media for that shift. And then there's the pursuit of fame. Sociologists have repeatedly shown that the desire for notoriety drives many of these attacks. It's a consistent, well-documented trend. Clay Higgins emphasized this point with a personal story from his own experience, and he made some very valid observations in the process.
You know what these houses did not have? That were built 100 years ago in cities in America. You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks. A country where guns were everywhere and virtually not regulated at all. Where millions of Americans, 14 million Americans came back. It's 11% of the population at the time after World War II. And here we sit today where an entire once proud Democratic Party is presenting unbelievably unconstitutional laws to press upon our nation, and we have a police commissioner that says he would go home to home and confiscate legally owned weapons.
At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Guns are just inanimate objects. Without intent, they pose no threat. Sure, smarter regulations could help reduce harm, and that's worth discussing, but it all needs to stay within the bounds of the Second Amendment. Step outside those boundaries, and you're looking at government overreach and a direct infringement on the individual rights the Constitution guarantees. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, keep thinking.